Welcome back. If you're a parent, you dream to send your kids off to college. For a lot of families, the 2008 economic collapse turned that dream into a nightmare. The savings of many families were wiped out, resulting in student loans as the only way to send kids off to college. As Kate Flexter just reported, there are $1.4 trillion in outstanding student loans. 44 million Americans have student debt, and good-paying jobs that pay good salaries to pay off those loans are hard to find. Joining us for more is Jacob Harding, Director of College Counseling at the Out of Door Academy, Professor Michael Snipes, an economics instructor at USF Sarasota Manatee, and Susan Nylon of Nylon Associates. And Susan, we invited you here tonight because not only are you going to law school and taking out student loans, your son is about to go off to Eckerd College, I believe. Yeah,
so I know student loans very well. In fact, I do my best not to think about the surmounting responsibility that we've taken on. But yeah, he's leaving for Eckerd in a week, as a matter of fact. And
my son is leaving for Fairleigh Dickinson University in just a couple of weeks. So these are issues that are near and dear to many of our hearts. And Michael, are we correct to say that, again, because of that economic collapse in 2008 that we all talk about, you know, many families did try to save, but they were so devastated by what happened. It put a lot of people back.
Sure, lots and lots of people throughout 2008, 2009 just had their savings just completely wiped out, and that could include savings for college. Any kind of tax-free account that you might have had, that can get wiped out. Any savings that you might have had in a checking or savings account, that could have gotten wiped out, or any kind of stocks or bonds that you had. I mean, some of that value could have gotten wiped out too. And so,
Jacob, how many people, parents, students who go to Out of Door Academy found themselves right in that position?
So while we're fortunate because we're a private school, we do have quite a few families that have need issues, right? As I said prior, $250,000 is not something that most families, even those in the upper middle class, can afford out of pocket, right? So I would say half of our students, that is the primary concern when looking at colleges, is how much is this going to cost? Can I afford this opportunity? And that's something that we as counselors have to be very aware of.
I would imagine the people watching us right now can be split into at least two different categories. The people who know exactly what we're talking about, and the people who say, they've been very successful in life, their kids are getting to school fine or have already been in school, and that if you can't afford it, don't go there.
That sounds good on the surface, but really kind of the reality facing most people is that if you don't have a college degree, that's going to really limit your income potential, and that's really going to limit the options that you have for your life, the options that you have for your future. So even though it sounds good, it doesn't necessarily reflect reality.
But there are also people who are watching this who say, when I went to school many years ago, I worked until 2 o'clock in the morning. I made those sacrifices. I worked around the clock. What was good for me would be good for you.
And I could say I did the same thing. In my undergraduate, I worked a 40-hour-a-week job, and I paid for the whole thing myself. And even with that, I still had 10 years after of a college loan, and I didn't have that great of a debt at that point in time. But what I also did is I missed out on a lot of the opportunities that I could have had through college because I was literally working all the time. You finish class and you get on the bus or you get on the train and you go right into work, and you miss all the other wonderful things that you have. And I'm not talking about partying, but I'm just talking about building relationships, networking, making connections. It's not a solution, it's just a necessity.
That's a good place to pause this conversation. I want to talk about what we're talking about in terms of the bubble or the pending crisis in our next segment. Our conversation is just getting started, and we'll have more right after we check the weather. Welcome back. 44 million Americans have student loan debt. Americans owe $1.4 trillion in outstanding student debt. Joining us for more is Jacob Harding, Director of College Counseling at the Out of Door Academy, Professor Michael Snipes, an economics instructor at USF Sarasota Manatee, and Susan Nylon of Nylon Associates. So when we talk about the looming student loan crisis, Michael, what exactly are we talking about?
Well, generally speaking, what we're talking about is, on average, we have students graduating with about $30,000 in debt. And when you give somebody just going out, starting their career, typically starting their career at lower salaries, and right off the bat, they're $30,000 in the hole. That's going to make purchasing things later on down the road that could potentially grow the economy, like buying a house, buying a car, and some of the bigger purchases like that. That's going to make those kind of purchases, those big ticket purchases, a lot more difficult to do because we're already starting on average. For some people, it might be a lot more.
So what is the potential impact on the greater economy?
On the greater economy, well, one thing that we do need to keep in mind, and that was mentioned in the piece earlier, is that you can't really declare bankruptcy on student loan debt. And that's kind of the primary difference between that kind of debt and any other kind of debt. And so if you come into a place where you can't make your student loan payments, you're going to have to make sacrifices in other places. And it's those sacrifices, be it maybe cutting back on housing, that could drag the economy down, because consumer spending is such a large part of the economy. If people are taking money that could be used to make a down payment on a house or a down payment on a car, and instead that money is getting shifted towards, in a lot of cases, just paying interest, not even necessarily paying the principal, that's something that could drag the economy down, could slow growth, because a lot of that's not necessarily going to other consumption that would otherwise occur.
Of course, this has become a major political issue, and if you remember, Susan, during the presidential campaign, Bernie Sanders made it a cornerstone of his presidential campaign, basically proposing free college,
Sure, still
which,
working on it.
Many folks on the other side would say that is totally impractical, but it is something that, is the Congress dealing with in any way, or have they just basically turned a blind eye so far?
Well, I'd say with all the other things that are going on right now, free college degrees aren't on the tip of their tongue anymore. However, I think it's short-sighted. There are 4.7 million borrowers that are that have defaulted on their loans at least 90 days, if not more. 4.7 million people aren't paying their college loans. So you want to talk about a potential bubble or a potential crisis, that is something that if we don't pay attention to, if we can't figure out some kind of program to help people pay off their debt, because, very much like what was just said, it's not that they don't want to pay off their debt, it's that they can't. Maybe the job wasn't there that they thought, or they just don't have the cost.
And short of what Bernie Sanders has proposed, the issue before Congress right now that Republicans and Democrats have at least talked about is giving students the ability to restructure that debt, but still nothing has been done about that as of yet. And I would imagine that's very frustrating to folks out there who kind of need that kind of help.
Yeah, and I think so. One of the biggest things we can do, right, to help ourselves, so that the public can help themselves and be educated consumers, is to take a deeper dig into what the costs are going to be. Use that cost calculator that was talked about prior, right? Go to the White House has a great website, College Scorecard, that talks about how many students from a school default on their loans on average. What is the average earning potential out of a certain school? What is the 6-year graduation rate out of the school? So or at least have an expectation of what most graduates are doing out of certain institutions, so you're not taking out a massive amount of money for a school that may not have great job placement, may not have, may have defaulting on debt as a high
But
issue.
the problem is, as Michael said earlier, a lot of people, a lot of families who thought that they had this all planned out before the Great Recession, their plans were basically, deep sixth now, and they're in a position that they have to take actions today, not tomorrow.
Right. And so I think taking actions today is looking at alternatives, right? Where do you want to end up 4 years from now, right? And how can you get there with the least cost? The junior college system in the state of Florida is incredible. The state college system is fantastic, right? A lot of programs, if you go 2 years at a state college, you can move into a 4-year college seamlessly, and that cost is incredibly low. Pell Grants for families who earn less than $60,000, right? Their child can qualify for a Pell Grant, which is just around $6,000. That doesn't have to be repaid. That's $6,000. That's tuition. That covers tuition in most Florida state system institutions. Not room and board, not fees, but tuition, right? And that is a great program that a lot of families don't know, because they don't know you have to apply for FAFSA. They don't know about CSS profile and all these other pieces of paperwork that you have to fill out just to get the federal money.
Michael, you're an economist, but you also work at one of the largest universities in Florida. Is the school looking at or trying to weigh in with members of Congress in terms of doing something about student debt relief, in terms of giving students an ability to restructure their debt, or in some ways making college more affordable?
Sure, and it's mostly a discussion that doesn't necessarily take place in D.C. It's something that takes place in Tallahassee, because it's a lot of the funding for a lot of the state schools comes from the state, and so a lot of those negotiations and a lot of that discussion takes place in Tallahassee. And that is one of the things. I mean, I get several emails every single semester talking about this specific issue. What can we do as an institution to keep costs down, right? What can we do as instructors to keep costs down? And so there's two different ways that we can approach this. One is we can say, what can we do as an institution? And even going down to what can we do as an instructor? What can we do to keep costs down? But that's only really part of it. The other part is going to have to come from, well, what is Tallahassee going to do with funding? You know,
And you don't know that year to year.
We don't. That changes
Correct.
every single year, and sometimes it changes month to month.
You know, I wanted to add, just the other day, Betsy DeVos, Department of Education, she had originally taken that position where she was going to crack down on all those people who have defaulted on their loans. And I think it was like yesterday or the day before, she announced that she's rethinking that position and going to establish some kind of program that will at least help on a nicer level get people to pay their money back.
That's very nice, but there's also been reporting there that the new administration, the Trump administration, wants to cut back in terms
Sure.
of federal student loans, which really, for families who are watching this right now, that is not good news.
Oh, it's not good news for me, because at a graduate level, I depend on those. You know, and it's nice to say, well, you should have planned better, but life doesn't work like that. And I would like to be able to see 25 years into the future so I know how to plan better. But
Jacob, I guess that's part of the problem. It's easy to plan,
Right.
or it's a good idea to plan, but it's more difficult to plan when basically the bullseye keeps moving.
Absolutely. So college data is dead the minute it's published. It changes the next day. And so staying on top of that is a full-time job, right? And that's what college counselors do. But the problem is in that most public schools in the state of Florida maybe have one college counselor for the entire public school. So you're talking 2,000, 3,000, maybe even 4,000 students who have one person whose full-time job is to look at that moving data and help all of those seniors and all of those juniors and all of those sophomores plan, right, and plan well for their college process.
Michael, I often ask, do other countries do this better?
Well, a little bit of kind of a tricky question. I mean, it depends upon what your definition of better is. I mean, certainly, at least in terms of student debt, you can look at a lot of countries in Europe, and you can look at a lot of the Scandinavian countries. A lot of the times, higher education is free. So if you're going to school for free, you're not graduating with any student debt, you're going to be in a lot better shape starting your life than you would be saddled with $30,000 in debt. So at least in terms of student debt, certainly.
Yeah, and I think, so quality of education, I would argue that America is still the front runner in higher education. Quality of education, research funding, research opportunities. But there are countries that even the cost for international students is sometimes less than state costs. Mm-hmm. Great Britain is a prime example of that. Canada has high quality higher education, and it's significantly less than the United States.
Right. Why don't we take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll come back with final thoughts from our guests. The looming student loan crisis. Our guests join us right now for final thoughts, and one area that we did not discuss, yes, Susan, was Bright Futures.
yeah, Bright Futures was sold to the state of Florida as a reason for the lottery, and it's basically what put us over the edge, you know, for the good of the children. And yet, year after year after year, our state legislature seems to not only chip away at the amount that they award the parents, but also they increase the qualifications for it. So somebody who would have qualified for it 5-6 years ago probably won't qualify for it this year.
Michael, from what you're seeing, is this going to be a bubble like we saw the housing crisis burst a couple of years ago?
I wouldn't necessarily expect it to have the same kind of effect as a bubble. It's a little bit different than really kind of what a bubble is, but it's certainly something that if it's not addressed could certainly slow growth, could certainly slow consumption, and could be a big problem for the economy at large.
Jacob, from your perspective, is there anything out there, anything new that parents and students can basically hang their hat on that will at least make it easier to get the help they need at the lowest price possible?
So I think this is the best time in history as far as support, right, goes for your student and your family. Colleges have become very need aware of the issues and circumstances with debt, and so they have personnel to help. Contact the financial aid office at the school you're thinking of attending. Contact the admissions office. See what opportunities and availability there is for funding that you didn't even explore. That is your best plan of action.
Okay. Thank you all. And before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic on the firehouse in Venice and the poor working conditions there. Fire Station 1 in Venice is literally falling apart. A hole in the roof, mold. What's the plan? Where's the money? Here are some of the comments on the subject. Kevin says, build a new one. Don't they deserve it? Clint adds, a city full of millionaires and we can't even fund our fire department? Wow. Scott closes out our comments tonight by saying, gut the existing one, much cheaper, faster than architects, permits, studies, kickbacks required. Well, if you'd like to join the conversation about tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, you can watch past discussions. They're on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to all our guests tonight. Jacob Harding is the Director of College Counseling at the Out of Door Academy. Professor Michael Snipes is an economics instructor at USF. Sarasota Manatee and Susan Nylon is with the Nylon Report. Thanks for joining us tonight.